Uh, Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth paradigm, second episode. We're going to talk about uh, life of an ambassador, a diplomat, a career diplomat. Today we have joining us Ambassador Mohan Kumar, who's also a professor and vice dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs. He is someone that we've personally interacted with at the JSIA during our classes, a very accomplished individual. So, sir, right off the bat, my first question to you is how are you doing in these times?
I'm very well, actually. Doing all right, Avirat, frankly. Well, one realizes that a lot of things can really be done through webinars. So, not all, and between you and me, I'd rather teach physically rather than online. Much better. But some of these other seminars for which we used to waste a lot of time, those things are better done online, actually. But anyway, that's a long question, a long answer to your question. Anyway.
Yeah. So, sir, my first question to you is, can you tell us a little about your diplomatic career? I mean, it's been a very illustrious one. We've heard your anecdotes from your service in France, in Bahrain, so on and so forth. So, can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. Look, I don't know if it's illustrious, but it's very interesting. And therefore, I always motivate youngsters who have a passion for international affairs. If you do, and if you're interested in what's happening in the world, then that's fantastic. And that's precisely what you need to have in order to join the Foreign Service. But that's probably your last question. So we'll come to that later. So let's get on with this. No, look, I don't want to talk too much about my entire 36 years. It's a long time. So I'll begin with maybe the French language and Francophone postings. I will then talk a little bit about my experience of Sri Lanka, and then GATT and WTO, which all of you know that's an area I've specialized in. And finally, Bahrain and France, okay? The two places where I was ambassador. So let me begin with the French language. So, I was ironically sent to Geneva to learn French. So my first week in the Ministry of External Affairs started with a massive protest by Mohan Kumar, who went to the administration and said, listen, send me to Paris. Why are you wasting me, sending me to Geneva? And you will be amazed at the reasoning. And that's what I want you guys to understand. So the reasoning was that I was a bachelor, and Geneva is very expensive in terms of accommodation. So they sent all the married officers to Paris and sent the bachelor to Geneva. So that was the logic of sending me to Geneva to learn French. So anyway, it's another matter that I enjoyed Geneva hugely. Now in Morocco, a very interesting thing happened, and that's probably happened just to me actually, because I ended up flying the Austrian flag rather than the Indian flag. Normally in an Indian embassy, you fly the Indian flag. So you might wonder why I flew the Austrian flag. And that's because the Moroccans broke off diplomatic relations with India. And when there is a break in diplomatic relations, two things can happen. One, they tell all of you to get out. That's what Pakistan and India normally do to each other. But here, the Moroccans said that the ambassador should leave immediately within 24 hours, and the rest of the guys will stay back. So I stayed back since I was not an ambassador at the time. I was a junior diplomat. And since the Moroccans pretty much broke off diplomatic relations, we had to seek diplomatic refuge with the embassy of Austria. And so the Indian diplomatic representation in Morocco became Embassy of Austria, Indian Interest Section. And so we flew the Austrian flag. My car plates, number plates were Austrian. My identity card was Austrian. So I joked to the Ministry of External Affairs that my salary should also be Austrian, for which of course, a very negative reply to that. So you can imagine. Then in Zaire, Congo, something very interesting happened. I evacuated 3,000 Gujaratis. A lot of Gujaratis in Congo, which was formerly called Zaire. because there were riots in Zaire, and they needed a French-speaking officer to evacuate these 3,000 citizens. So we flew an Air India plane from Delhi, went on to Congo, and then evacuated all these people. So that was basically the first 10 years of my life. It was involved with learning French, doing things like what I did in Morocco, which was French speaking at the time. It has now become completely Arabic. But those days, the Moroccans actually spoke better French than the French. French they spoke. But anyway, so Congo was also Francophone. Then I came back to Delhi, and I was the desk officer for Sri Lanka. And what was interesting about that, a lot of things interesting, but the one interesting thing that stood out for me was we wanted the Sri Lankan Tamil refugees based in Chennai to go back to Sri Lanka. Because the circumstances in Sri Lanka were getting better, we wanted to do relocation of Tamils or Tamil refugees back to their homeland. So I was put on a ship, and I accompanied about 340 refugees, and the LTT bombed us. So we escaped narrowly on a ship, the Indian ship carrying the Sri Lankan, because it was in LTT's interest that these refugees didn't come back, because they didn't want a normalcy to return to Sri Lanka. That was interesting. And then, of course, I spent about 8 to 10 years doing GATT and WTO in Geneva, which was hugely interesting as well. I was ambassador in Bahrain, which I will respond later about the Arab Spring when you ask me. But in Bahrain, it was quite an eye-opener for me to see the kind of Indians who we have working in different places, the number of Indians we have, and the kind of dependence that these West Asian Gulf countries have on Indian labor. It's quite remarkable, actually. And then I finished my career being Indian ambassador to France. France is an important strategic partner for India. And it's the dream of every Indian Foreign Service officer to become an ambassador to what is known as P5 countries, which are United States, UK, France, Russia, China. That really is the dream. I mean, every Indian Foreign Service officer cannot become Foreign Secretary. So if you have to retire as an ambassador, the place to retire is these 5 countries, which are extremely important for India. With France, we have a strategic partnership because it includes defense. I learned a lot about nuclear energy, which I did not know about. And I was ambassador when the climate change negotiations were concluded in Paris. So I ended up learning quite a bit about climate change as well. In fact, I'm writing a book now on WTO, climate change, and nuclear disarmament. So just to conclude that the only way I can express my sentiment about my career is what I told the CEO of Pepsi once. I wouldn't exchange my job with yours. The CEO of Pepsi was quite offended because they were all getting $1 million a year, which I was not getting as ambassador, obviously. But I think you will have to make up your mind what you need in life, what you want in life, what gives you an adrenaline surge every morning. And you then decide what you want to do in life. I think I was extraordinarily lucky to do this. So I hope that is a comprehensive answer to your first question. But thank you for asking.
Right. I mean, I almost feel like I want to ask you for the rights to make a movie on your life someday. Very, very interesting life, I must say. So moving on to the second question is, what's a day like in the life of of an ambassador? Like, how does it begin? What does a normal day entail?
Right, that's a good question. Let me begin with a caveat, which is that if you are receiving the Indian Prime Minister to France, or you have a ministerial visit, that's not a normal day. That's an abnormal day. So I'm not going to talk about that. You know, obviously, when you have a ministerial delegation, the Prime Minister coming or somebody coming, then it becomes really charged and you're working 24/7. That's not normal. What I am going to tell you is a very typical day of an ambassador. So, of course, there are again 2 kinds of ambassadors. So I will confine myself to an active ambassador in an active post. Okay, so you cannot, by definition, compare the Indian ambassador in Paris with the Indian ambassador in St. Lucia, for example. I'm deliberately choosing St. Lucia because we don't have an ambassador there. If I mention an ambassador who's serving, he or she will be deeply offended. So I'm saying, basically, if you're an active ambassador, your day will look something like this. So you would typically start with a breakfast meeting, because diplomats find that the more you eat with somebody, the more you drink with somebody, the more you entertain, you are gathering significant pieces of information. So the very backbone of information gathering for an ambassador is entertainment. Most people misunderstand this, especially my biradari from the Indian Administrative Service. They will say that, listen, these guys are only drinking and eating all the time. That's not true. Because what you're doing is you're gathering significant information. So I'll give you a typical day for the Indian ambassador in France. You begin with a breakfast meeting, let's say at the Canadian ambassador's residence. And you do this because the Indian ambassador and the Canadian ambassador are on the board of the academic India House in Paris. There is a India House. There is a place in the heart of Paris where you've got the Canada House, the India House, the Belgian House, the Finland House. This is where students are located. It's not the ambassador's residence. It is where Indian students come and live in the heart of Paris. So we coordinate with like-minded ambassadors about what the problems of these students are. So the academic committee of France, they have a monthly breakfast, and normally it's hosted by the Indian ambassador or the Canadian. So a typical day, let's say, will start with the Canadian ambassador's breakfast meeting, at which you are discussing the life of Indian students in Paris and the kind of issues they face. And of course, Canadian students will have their own issues and so on. Following that, one of the most important things, and this is regardless of whether you are an active ambassador or not, you have to spend a lot of time reading the cables that come from the Ministry of External Affairs. There are cables. When I say cable, it's classified. It's a confidential, secret, top secret, but these are issued by the Foreign Minister of India, the Foreign Secretary of India, to the most active ambassadors. You get these cables. It's very important you go through those cables before the day begins, or if there's a time lag, then you do it the day before. But you need to do this because one of the most humiliating things for an Indian is that you go and start meeting the French people and somebody asks you, hey, can you respond to something that has happened in Delhi? And you have no luxury of turning around and saying, I'm sorry, I haven't heard about it. Because if you do that, they will come to the conclusion that you are a blithering idiot. If you don't even know what's going on in your country, that's not acceptable. So you need to be absolutely up to date with what is happening first in India, which means by extension, you also need to at least pick 3 or 4 newspapers from India. And by 10 o'clock in the morning or max 11 o'clock, you need to get that out of your way. After that, you can keep doing it on your mobile phone. But if you haven't read the main editorials, so you just need to know. I mean, it's like if I was Indian ambassador in France today, I need to know the COVID situation in India. That's absolutely important. If the Prime Minister has inaugurated a foreign investment scheme in India, I should be the first to know that. Otherwise, I'm cutting a sorry figure. So this takes you on till about 11. Invariably, a lot of active ambassadors will have an officers' meeting of the embassy. Many embassies will have at least, let's say, starting with 5 up to 25, 30. These are, I'm talking only diplomats. I'm not talking the staff, the consular officials, and so on. So 25, 30 people, you have an officers' meeting so that you hear from each of the diplomats what is going on in France. So you can see that I've already shifted my focus from India to France. I need to know from the younger diplomats as ambassador what is going on in France, especially what's going on in France that can impact India. So the political situation, which will be given by the political wing, the economic commercial situation, which will be given by the political and commercial officer. Invariably, there are problems that India faces. The mango consignment, which has not come to France, the kind of investment from France that is not happening in Uttar Pradesh because of some problem, those kind of issues. And then, of course, consular. We have a huge Indian community everywhere in the world now. And as I kept telling you in my class, every week we have somebody dying, somebody, being born, somebody being robbed, somebody being abused by their husband. These are normal because you are now no longer dealing with 10,000 people. Everywhere you have 1 million Indians now. That's the kind of problem. That's the kind of scale we are talking about. So the consular issues are important. We move to other wings. You see, you must understand that many people posted in Paris, for example, are not diplomats. So you have the science wing, which is not, there is no diplomat there. It's a scientific officer. Then you've got space research, which again is a non-diplomat. He's not a diplomat. Those people need to be guided because they are often doing only one posting. They come to Paris for just one posting. They have their own issues and they have their own challenges. So you need an officers meeting, and in an officers meeting, the ambassador normally gives them an overriding objective and vision for the embassy. The Indian embassy in Paris must have some kind of a vision, which the ambassador contributes to, and this has to go beyond just having good relations. You need to set targets and concrete objectives. So that's what you do in an officers meeting. You invariably have a lunch with other ambassadors. If you're a friendly soul, and it's very funny. The ambassador being entertained doesn't depend on the country. It depends on your expertise. If the other ambassadors come to know that Mohan Kumar is not an idiot, he's reasonably intelligent, he has knowledge, then you get more invitations because they think it is worth their while to have lunch with you so that they can discuss some of the issues that is going on in France. You then go on to the afternoon. Invariably, you are in touch with the foreign office of the country to discuss with them visits, to discuss with them outgoing visits, incoming visits, issues, and so on. The evening, I will be very surprised if in a place like Paris, where there are 192 missions, diplomatic missions. So out of 365 days, 192 days is gone because you have to go for the National Day reception of countries. Even if it is Mali, even if it is Outer Mongolia, you have to go. And the National Day reception is a good occasion to gossip and to exchange information. So the National Day reception becomes important, following which I would be very surprised if in a place like Bahrain or Paris, you don't have a dinner given by the Indian community. Some friend of yours, somebody coming, somebody going. So this is pretty much the normal day. And this is an active ambassador. So there's very little time really, except for Saturday, Sunday. And if you are in the Gulf, it's Friday and Saturday. It's it's really a full day, which is why I kept arguing with the finance ministry in Delhi that the diplomat's profession is actually a serious profession. It's not like you can suddenly pick up somebody and say, I'll make you ambassador. It doesn't work like that. It's a very serious profession and you have to train to be a good diplomat. So I hope I've given you a flavor of what an average day looks like. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Archit?
Yes, sir. So you mentioned something about domestic issues and how, an ambassador or a diplomat has to be aware of them. So the next question is kind of connected. How does a change in the government back home affects your job and policies, and what's the perception of the diplomats from other countries that you're currently dealing with? Is there a big change in that dynamic when there's change in government back home?
So that's a good question. I would say, first off, that it matters more to an IAS officer the change of government. And it matters less to a foreign service officer who's posted abroad. If you're posted in Delhi, then the impact is much more. But if you are ambassador in Paris or London, or if you're ambassador in Bahrain, then the change of government in India is quite seamless. And I would consider myself very fortunate that we are a functioning democracy, and therefore the change of guard really doesn't make a big difference. For example, in the American system, when the president changes, every ambassador has to give a resignation letter. Every ambassador. Even if he is a career ambassador, you have to resign. And then the government of the United States with the new president will decide. Of course, in 60% of the cases, there may be no change, but that's not the point. The point is, when there is a change of government, there is a strong possibility that you are changed. Now, in the Indian system, we are so fortunate, first of all, that all our ambassadors are career ambassadors today. Normally it is 90%, but with Prime Minister Modi, it's been 100%. We don't have a single ambassador who's a political appointee, which is fantastic. So really, it doesn't make that much of a difference. However, having said that, if you are operating at the level of P5, the active ambassadors, then you do need to deal with the Prime Minister. And I can tell you that I have dealt with two Prime Ministers, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Modi. And really, it's chalk and cheese, completely different personalities. One is the present Prime Minister, for example, is proactive. He's probing you. He's questioning you. He is trying to understand where you are coming from and that kind of thing. The previous Prime Minister was basically in listening mode, frankly. Very bright, of course, in his own way, but he was listening mode. So you have to adjust to those styles. One important skill, since you asked this question, one important skill is for a diplomat or a bureaucrat to interpret complex events and convey it in a political message to the politician. This is a very important skill. I realized it very late in my life, but this is an important skill. So if there is a change of government in France, it doesn't matter to the Indian politician whether it is a lady, man, Macron, François Hollande. No, he's saying, how the hell does it matter to me when it comes to Rafale, when it comes to French investment? Does it make a difference? This is something you should be able to interpret, because the Indian Prime Minister is only interested in that. Nobody is interested in what clothes the president is wearing or who he's sleeping with. We don't give a damn. What matters is really policy impact for India. So I would say that yes, it makes a difference, but not that much as compared to people in Delhi or with bureaucrats.
Yeah, so the next question is, in your multiple interactions with global leaders, what are the finest delegations you have come across? Like the best diplomatic teams and the most efficient ones? Like if you had to rank them.
So I'll begin with the best diplomatic delegations, and I'd like to say something about the leaders. I'll separate it into two parts if you don't mind. So the best delegations from my perspective, and since I've spent a lot of time in multilateral fora in Geneva, I would say the American career diplomats are excellent. The career ones, not the non-career ones, the career ones are excellent. I think I've told you this in the class, but I will repeat it for your audience. It's worth looking at the WikiLeaks, because they've done you a huge favor by giving you all the telegrams drafted by the American diplomats. Their drafting skills are extraordinary. I think I've told you this. I figure in one of the WikiLeaks where I was briefing American diplomats, and they have captured it. And it's amazing. Reading it, I can't even deny what is in WikiLeaks, because they really captured it word by word, even though they don't note down in front of you. So that's a skill. So I would say the American diplomats. The Brazilian diplomats are professional. They have a very, very meritocratic system. You have to know Latin and French in order to get into the Brazilian diplomatic service. So it's almost, the opposite of the affirmative system that we have. It's a very, very meritocratic system and so on. Indian diplomats are highly rated, or at least were highly rated. I don't know how it will be in 20 years' time, but I think they are highly rated. I would add one more episode to make my point. So I was negotiating in Geneva at the WTO, and at one stage we decided we will meet on a Sunday. This is highly exceptional because in Europe, you know, in Bahrain and stuff like that, we used to meet on Sunday every time. But in Europe, the Sunday is very sacrosanct for everybody. You call a meeting, nobody will come. So we said, no, we've got the Uruguay round coming. We need to meet on Sunday. So everybody agreed. So we all came in our private cars on Sunday because, you know, Sunday the driver doesn't show up in Europe. So you have to drive the car yourself. All of us came. When I was driving by, I saw the Cuban ambassador stand in the bus stop. So I stopped and I said, Excellency, please come in. I'll give you a lift. He said, yeah, thank you very much. Do you know the Cuban ambassador was carrying a bag full of vegetables and milk? He had shopped in a supermarket and he was taking the bus to come to the meeting. And I said, Your Excellency, you could have driven the car. He smiled at me and he says, I don't have a car. He says, I don't have a car. And then we started chatting. And to cut a long story short, the Cuban ambassador in Geneva was only being paid as much as an Indian third secretary in Geneva. And yet, look at the commitment and the dedication of this diplomat. So I have a lot of respect for Cuban diplomats. They are excellent. Their worldview is something you may not agree with, obviously, because, you know, we've become, you know, much less socialist and so on. And they continue to be socialist. But the Cuban diplomats are highly skilled, committed. But what I want to say is the kind of patriotism I saw is something unbelievable. So I would mention these four delegations. In terms of leaders, it was interesting that right in the beginning of my career in 1982, I was undergoing district training in Banaras for 6 months. You know, the foreign service officers have to undergo district training because we are all considered people from St. Stephen's, in urban areas, and they said, you guys don't know the village, so go to a place and learn something. You know, how the district administration works. A wonderful 6 months I had in Banaras, I must say. So the collector of Banaras, without telling me the full details, told me one day, Mohan, you get into my car, my driver will take you to two individuals who are both polar opposites, and this will demonstrate to you human behavior. So I said, can you tell me who they are? He says, no, I would like it to be a surprise. So first the driver takes me to the home of the Shehnai king, Bismillah Khan. And obviously a wonderful man. He received me, a big house in the old city of Banaras. It was a joint family with a lot of children running around. Gave me a glass of lassi and I spoke to him and I said how much I liked his music. Really a wonderful man. So this was obviously a good example of a great human being who was revered in northern India or India, and a great musician and so on, a great artist actually. So I was very curious now who the second person I was going to meet, because he had to be the polar opposite of Bismillah Khan. So the driver took me to the central jail of Banaras. And we went into the central jail, and then I was told, you're going to meet Charles Sobraj. Have you guys heard of Charles Sobraj? You should Google.
Yes, sir.
This murder.
Yes,
he was a real serial killer, but you won't believe it. He was all dressed to kill to receive me. He says, it's my proud privilege to receive a diplomat like you. He sat in his cell. It was his solitary cell. And he sat in a chair, I sat in a chair. And he was asking me the most intelligent questions on Indian foreign policy. Amazingly intelligent guy, Charles Sobraj. I'll never forget. And we had a half an hour discussion and he said, do you think we can continue with non-alignment like this? And he says, don't you think we should become close to United States? He was asking me in 1982, all these questions. Amazing. So it was a good example to tell you that as a diplomat, as a foreign service officer, you get to meet all kinds of people. For example, I have met Slobodan Milosevic in Belgrade, and he was a Serbian leader, but he was not such a good leader in the sense that, you know, he was ultimately tried in the International Criminal Court and died there. I've met Mobutu Sese Seko, who was the president of Zaire, now called Congo, who was also an authoritarian leader. But I also met the Dalai Lama. And this is to just give you an idea about the kind of leaders that you interact with. I would say in the context of meeting leaders, the intelligent thing is to ask questions and then shut up and let them speak. That is the most intelligent way of doing it. If you are going to be silent all the time, then you can't get what you want out of them. So you should at least have the skill to be able to ask searching questions for which you can get then answers. That is very, very important.
Right. Right.
And that's much for the leaders.
Archit.
Yeah. So the next question is about the Arab Spring and how was it, you know, being an ambassador there during such a time where, you know, the political earthquake basically. So how was it serving there at such an important time?
So it's very interesting. When I got this assignment as India's ambassador to Bahrain, most people told me you will take care of a lot of labor issues, but nothing much is going to happen in a country like Bahrain. So you better go enjoy yourself. You will have 3-4 hours of work, which will all be labor work. But otherwise, I can't see, I don't think they were more wrong than that. Because when I went there, within 3 months, Arab Spring happened. And it was extraordinary. To be honest with you, it was extraordinary because if it happened in a country like India, it's different because we are used to it. We're used to a lot of these demonstrations on. In those countries, life is so, shall we say, peaceful, orderly, regimented, whatever you want to say. They are not used to these kind of, agitations and so on. And then, the Pearl Roundabout in Bahrain, I don't know if you remember, there used to be an architectural structure which used to be called the Pearl Roundabout. And there people just pitched up tents and said, we will not leave. So it was amazing in that sense. But for me, the real challenge was that as Indian ambassador in Bahrain, my brief was not to interfere in the internal affairs of Bahrain. Obviously, it's their problem. What they do with it is their business. As far as I'm concerned, the big decision I had to take was what to do with the Indian community. Because there was a time in March 2011, if I remember right, I had to take a decision. Many of them said, if you want us to go back, we'll go back. But if you want us to stay, we will stay. So they put the onus on me. I asked them, what would you like to do? Very frankly, my honest assessment was deep inside, none of them wanted to leave Bahrain and come to India. They wanted to stay on. But they said, we are worried about safety and it is your duty. I said, Indian ambassador cannot guarantee the safety of 350,000 people in a small country. How do you guarantee safety? You can't. So I took a decision that fine, it is not possible to repatriate 350,000 people to India. Because if I start doing that, it's going to take me 6 months. And it's going to take me an Air India flight every day. Only then I can repatriate 350,000. This is not a small number. So we can't. So I decided the best thing is to make a preparation in Bahrain so that these people can live in Bahrain. We intimated all the Indian schools that they should be available as refugee centers if something happened. We bought a lot of Heinz kidney beans. Do you know this kidney beans in a can?
Yeah.
So we got that, we got bread, we got water. That's all. You will have to live on this for about 7-8 days. And these things don't get bad. This is all you can eat when you are in a refugee camp. And of course, a lot of biscuits and water. This is all we did. We did all this through Indian supermarkets. We were prepared. Fortunately, it didn't come to that. But for me, the bigger challenge of the Arab Spring was what to do with the big Indian community. The rich part of the Indian community left Bahrain on their own. But we are talking about masses and masses of people who can't afford to even buy a ticket, air ticket. So that was the basic challenge, I would say. But I have to also place on record the fantastic cooperation by the Bahraini authorities. I mean, I remember the Bahraini foreign minister came to address the Indian community. And he said, we are extremely grateful to all of you for staying in Bahrain. Please don't leave. We need you now more than ever. And one of the emotional moments for me was when the Bahraini shopkeepers shut up their shop, closed shop, and the Indian shopkeepers said, no, we will keep it open as a measure of protest. They say we want to keep it open because we don't want to give in to the radical protesters. And that was a particularly moving moment for me. They said, it doesn't matter if they throw stones at the shop, we are going to open the shop. And this was not lost on the Bahraini royal family or the Bahraini authorities. So that was, a kind of solidarity, if you like, expressed by the Indian community to Bahrain at a time of distress for Bahrain. You know, most of the Indians will accept that Bahrain has given them a second life, a second home, as it were. That is the feeling you will get wherever you go in the Gulf. So they have a certain sentimental attachment to these countries, and they would like to stay solid, with solidarity with those countries at a time when things go really, really difficult. So that's something I had to deal with, I would say.
Yeah, and it's remarkable how the Indian community abroad, in terms of the diaspora, they all live like a proper community, and there is a sense of belonging to even the Republic of India, and there is that flavor of patriotism and culture, and it's all
especially in times of distress, especially in times of crisis, because politics then takes a backseat. Otherwise, all hell breaks loose. But when there is a crisis and when there is adversity, you're right. They really come together and they really consider themselves as ambassadors of India in that sense.
Okay. So, sir, moving on to the next question, I'd just like to understand, you were part of the Indian Foreign Service. You've spoken about your career, you've spoken about your challenges, what your entire diplomatic career. I just want to understand from you is why the youth of today should consider the Indian Foreign Service. I'm not telling you to justify it at all because it's a wonderful thing in itself, but a lot of the Indian community, especially in the urban milieu, are driving towards different kinds of occupations that aren't they're not accounting for the Indian Foreign Service as a viable career option. At least people interested in foreign policy, they're choosing to go into research and think tanks. So what do you have to say on that? And also I must mention on record, sir also runs a think tank himself. And yeah, sir, it'll be wonderful to know from you.
So I think there is never a better time to join the Indian Foreign Service than now, because of the following reasons. One, I think India is now an important station. I wish I could say that when I'm in the Indian Foreign Service, but that was not the case. I joined in 1981. What it is today. So today, I think to represent India on the world stage, you would not only have to consider it a huge privilege, secondly, you matter, and that is big. You don't have to shout to be heard today. In 1981, the Indian diplomat had to struggle to be heard. What were we? Nothing. You were considered the land of monkeys and rope tricksters and fakirs. That's what you were in 1980. The reforms happened only in 91. I'm talking of 81. So 81, India was nothing on the world stage. Today, I think we have so much clout, so much geostrategic importance. So that's the first reason. The second reason is, I think the job of the Indian Foreign Service officer has become very, very varied. There was a time when all the Foreign Service officer did was to attend receptions, drink some wine with others, do some political reporting. In many, many places, there was 4 hours of work every day. You can have a long siesta, then go for a reception lazily in the evening and come back. Might have been the situation in, 50s and 60s. But today, the kind of things that Foreign Service officers are asked to do is amazing variety in the job. So even look at my career. I had to learn the French language and use it. I had to learn GATT and WTO from scratch. In fact, I still remember the first day, and I'm not ashamed of admitting it, when I was posted as first secretary GATT, and the Foreign Secretary's office told me, I ran to the dictionary to see what GATT stood for. I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue what GATT stood for. I knew I was going to Geneva, so I was very happy and thrilled. But I said, let me look up this dictionary. What the hell is GATT? Those days, we didn't have the mobile phone to do the Google search. So you had to go to the Oxford Dictionary to see what the hell is GATT. So I think you could learn that. Climate change, at the ripe old age of 58 years, when they decided that climate change negotiations were going to happen in Paris, I thought I should learn this. Otherwise, in front of the Prime Minister, I'll make a fool of myself. So I did that. You've got cyber security. People are specializing in nuclear weapons, nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation. People are specializing in comparative culture. I mean, I'm not a huge fan and I'm not an expert, but there are people in the Foreign Service who take cultural diplomacy very, very seriously, and they're so good at it. So frankly, I cannot think of a career where you have so much diversity as you have in the Foreign Service. What I want to tell your audience, and both of you, you're all very young. One of the things, as you proceed in life, what is going to matter less and less is, number one, money. Please trust me on this, because right now I know you don't trust me. All you want is money, but that's understandable. But believe me, that is going to matter less and less. Secondly, what is going to matter more and more is the number of lives that you can change. Can you be a change agent? That's the only thing that's going to make a difference. Now, in order to do these two things successfully, you should not be in a situation where you are working for a fund, hedge fund. All you are doing from morning till evening is make money on other people's money. That's the brief definition of a fund banker. What else are you doing? You're not playing with your money. You're getting a fat salary, but you're using other people's money to make more money on it. That's all. How interesting is that day in, day out? Why do you think people burn out at 40 when they do jobs like that? And why do you think they say we have retired?
Yeah.
That is not because they have retired. They have been politely told, your brain is already dead. We are looking at another 20-year-old fellow who can do a better job than you. That's what it means. Right. So really think this decision has to be taken by people like you at your age. At you, Avirat, and you, Archit, you must be able to take this decision, because you can't wait too long to make this decision. So you simply have, I keep meeting the people who have just joined the Foreign Service. There's a girl who has left JP Morgan and joined. Why should she do that? Tell me. Why would you leave JP Morgan and join the foreign service at a salary of 50,000 rupees starting? That is the salary of a foreign service probationer. Why would you do that? She must have been making at least 2 lakhs a month easily. If not 2 lakhs, at least 1.5 lakhs easy. Because she's an MBA from some good university abroad. I don't remember. So, but why would you do that? So I think only wise people will know how to make this decision. The other thing about the foreign service, and that's what I want your audience to understand, in many foreign countries, you can actually do JP Morgan for 10 years and then become a diplomat. Unfortunately, in India, we don't allow lateral entry. So if you miss the bus and you don't write the civil services exam, then it's a regret you will always hold throughout your life, that listen, I should have given it a shot. I mean, my advice always is give it a shot a couple of times. Don't do it 6 times like the topper recently who proudly says I've taken the exam 6 times. I think that's a ridiculous proposition in my view. But anyway, each one to himself. Take it twice or thrice max and then move on in life. That's fine. At least you will have no regret. But I think in today's circumstances, India is on the cusp of big power status. We haven't become a big power yet. We are a regional power. But I think we will. We definitely bid fair to become one. And I think it would be a mistake not to look at the foreign service as a serious career option. I think it would be a grave mistake, frankly, unless you are completely mathematically inclined, you are a complete introvert, you hate languages, you hate meeting people. There are people like that. There are people who love to sit in front of a laptop all day and do software coding and so on. I have nothing to say. I think it's fine. But as long as you are not that, I think overlooking the foreign service as a career option would be a mistake in my view. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. And so you've also shared with us how, a colleague of yours, Mr. Tarur, has this remorse about not giving the UPSC. And I mean, it's only fair that the Indian Foreign Service benefits from the youth of today. And it's like, that whole brain drain culture is sort of, emptying us in the wrong places. But anyway, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. It was wonderful, like always, chatting with you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining the Fifth Paradigm. This was episode 2 with Ambassador Mohan Kumar about the life of a career diplomat. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And see you next time.
Thank you, Avirat. Thank you, Archit.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Oh, sir, just 1 second.